Hi, this is Jan Richard Kickert, author of Lautner A to Z. You're listening to US Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to US Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Today on the show, we go out west to Texas and New Mexico, talking with modern preservationists Amy Walton and Thea Haver. Also, here in the studio, it's architectural historian Paige Wagner-Clausen. And now, here's the guy who used to think vernacular buildings were powered purely by uranium. Mr. Modernism, George Smart. Hello, George.
Hi, folks. Welcome to the show. Do you recognize that voice? It's not Tom.
No.
Those golden tones were on WUNC FM and National Public Radio for over 2 decades. When I was in college, the man behind this melodious voice hosted an interview show called Soundings, based in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. Every week, a scholar studying or visiting the National Humanities Center shared their knowledge and passion for an area of academic pursuit. Wayne Pond interviewed journalists, poets, novelists, documentary filmmakers, musicians, governors, members of Congress, and tech leaders about their work in the arts, education, ethics, religion, politics, philosophy, and even architecture. There were 862 shows, which aired on more than 350 radio stations, plus the Armed Forces Radio Network. I learned a lot. I was also totally inspired by Wayne's diction. He said every word, kind of like the original Captain Kirk of Star Trek, as if Wayne had just invented the entire alphabet that morning. He opened every show basically the same way, like this. This is Soundings, a magazine of insights from the National Humanities Center. I'm Wayne Pond. Partial support for this program comes from Carolina Power and Light, where listening generates powerful ideas.
No, George. No. You've got to move your tongue up just a little bit, sit a little further back, or make that farther, and breathe a little more deeply through your nose like this. This is Soundings, a magazine of ideas and insights from the National Humanities Center. I'm Wayne Pond. Partial support for this program comes from Carolina Power and Light, where listening generates powerful ideas, and a whole lot of other people, too.
That is fantastic.
Fantastic. Wayne, it's a thrill to have you on the show. And thank you, CP&L, which became Duke Energy, which became Dominion Energy, and National Public Radio for supporting Wayne's show for so long. Soundings was on the air with millions of listeners, at least a few dozen more than we have now for this show.
A few.
From 1980 to 1997. And the show lives on in archives at the National Humanities Center iTunes site.
Let me add a footnote, George, real quick. The archive also lives at the UNC Chapel Hill Libraries in the Southern Historical Collection.
As it should.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm very happy to report that.
Wayne, how did Soundings get started and how did you get connected with it?
Well, it got started because the trustees of the Humanities Center said, let's do some public outreach and do it on the cheap. Television was ungodly expensive. Radio was a medium that was relatively inexpensive. And I had worked in radio in Chapel Hill for years, had some friends both in public and commercial radio. And thanks to the good offices of my mentor at UNC Chapel Hill, who was a founding trustee of the center, I was the lucky guy who got that job and started that program. So that's basically how it got off the ground. That was in 1979 and 80.
So who were some of your most memorable guests?
It would be egregiously unfair to name names, but I will name a couple of
Good.
names. There were dozens of them. The majority of them were fellows, as they were called, of the Humanities Center, writing books, doing articles. They turned in a lot of, they weren't household names, but they were very smart people, fun to listen to. I will pick two names, though. John Hope Franklin, the distinguished historian, one of my heroes. He was a trustee at the National Humanities Center. And then we had a lot of writers and poets. And among my favorites were Ms. Morrison, Toni Morrison.
Toni Morrison, sure.
Was a trustee, and my beloved friend Allen Gurganus, the novelist, lives over in with that nest of ill-tempered writers over in Hillsborough.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. So it was just never a dull moment, for 17 years, the cast of characters that came through that place.
And you had on a young Paul Goldberger, right?
I did. He was the New York Times architecture critic. If my life depended on it, George, I wouldn't be able to tell you what we talked about. I'd have to go back and listen to the
If you don't tell us, we'll kill you, Wayne.
I take that threat
You
seriously.
just go back to the archives at the
That's right.
UNC and find out.
We'll find it.
Yeah.
Also in the studio, today's co-host, Paige Wagner-Clausen, an architectural historian with an avid appetite for all things architecture and design. In fact, she's chewing on our wicker broiler chair as we speak. That's good. Very good.
The script
sound
says that's
effect.
Paige making munching sound.
It's as close as I can get.
Paige is my new Instagram buddy. We met because I noticed that just about everything I liked, she liked, and vice versa, and thus a friendship was digitally born.
Aww.
Her very popular Instagram feed, Klaushaus, which she will spell for you later, works to seek out meaning, beauty, and significance in buildings and history and objects. She's visiting us today from Greenville, North Carolina, a city with not that many modernist houses, but a few, and she's active in the Southeast chapter of the Society of Architectural Historians, SAH. Welcome, Paige.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Paige, it says on your feed that you're plant obsessed. What does that mean? Do you collect them? Do you eat them like you do furniture, obviously? Or do you kidnap them to your secret modernist garden lair? What happens here?
Is all of the above an option? Maybe
Yes.
all three?
Yes.
All three, yeah. I do love plants. I inherited the green thumb from my father.
So what's your favorite plant to have around?
Monstera.
What is that?
It has those big heart-shaped leaves, and they have sort of little cuts in them. They get really big and full. They're pretty.
They're not like elephant ear plants.
Exactly.
Oh.
Kind of like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they fill a room or are they outdoors?
Well, depends on where you live, but they can fill a room. They look very good with modernist furniture. So a lot of you'll see them in modern houses.
Big pots, that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
And do they take any special sauce to make them grow and happy other than water?
Sunlight, of course, is always good. But you just have to make sure they don't die, I guess. You need to water them and maybe talk to them a little bit.
Just that.
I had a friend one time that swore that they used a watered-down version of Kraft Thousand Island dressing for their plants. And they said that was just to give them all the nutrients and minerals they need. I think they were just making it up. But if anybody's out there that knows about this method, please.
But then you harvest the plants and just have salad without having to put dressing on?
Pre-dressed.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's a blast to have you here, Paige. Thank you. Let's go back to vernacular. Wasn't it President George Bush who flew in the back of that fighter jet years ago from the deck of a vernacular-powered aircraft carrier?
No.
Mission accomplished? No, wait, that was a nuclear aircraft carrier.
Mm-hmm.
Vernacular basically means the local building style, but I would love to have a vernacular-powered helicopter in case anyone wants to stop by the studios and pick us one up. U.S. Modernist Radio is starting up its 6th year from the venerable Soundtrack Studios, plus remotes from New York, Los Angeles, and Palm Springs. We love our 39 listeners, including Jody and Dave in New Hampshire.
Hi, Jody. Hi, Dave.
Your reviews on iTunes, your likes and comments at Mr.Modernism on Instagram, and you're going on our exquisitely fun, all modernist, all the time U.S. Modernist curated trips to London, Oslo, Berlin, Copenhagen, Zurich, Brussels, and Amsterdam, which you can access via usmodernist.org and exclusively save $100, which is good. I have been everywhere on these trips, and your mind is going to go once you go. It's all-you-can-eat modernism every day. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Nichiha.com and modernist realtor Angela Roll.
Beauty, love, durability, designed to last for years to come, bringing you peace and tranquility. You feel relaxed, knowing your house can easily achieve any exterior look and any color. Wood, concrete. Your house loves feeling this good. And you love feeling this good. Nichiha, 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 Nichiha. Say it with me. Nichiha. Advanced engineering. Nichiha, Nichiha. Durability, textures, finishes, and colors. Visit Nichiha.com/US Modernist. Nichiha, Nichiha, Nichiha. That's Nichiha. Wait for it. A look you'll love. Nichiha.
All right, Paige, who have we got on the show today?
Amy Walton is from Texas, where she spent 15 years managing nonprofits like the North Texas Food Bank and the Jewish Family Service. Last year, she launched Mod Texas, an initiative to draw attention to Texas modernism and celebrate the people and institutions working to preserve it. Building a coalition of over a dozen nonprofits using social media, Mod Texans have shared thousands of images of mid-century design and architecture that can literally be mapped across the state. Creating the largest record of Texas modernism on the internet, the initiative aims to inspire Texans to get involved in preserving the buildings that make their neighborhoods unique. She loves show tunes and saying things in public her mom would prefer her not to say, don't we all? Welcome, Amy.
Thanks, y'all. Nice to be with you today.
When you think of Albuquerque, New Mexico, you might think of Southwest Adobe Design, or maybe that TV show In Plain Sight, which filmed there for 5 years. But you're certainly not thinking of modernist architecture yet. Thea Haver is hoping to change that. Thea is co-founder and director of Modern Albuquerque. She moved to A-Town in 2014 to accept a role with the National Museum of Nuclear Science and History.
So she's going to know about the history of vernacular power, right?
Thea was surprised, perhaps stunned by the area's modernism, and she established Modern Albuquerque in 2018 to both document and popularize it. Welcome, Thea.
Hello and welcome. And that's real hopeful of you, George. I don't think so today.
Okay. Well, Amy, before we get started, can you belt out a little show tune for us? I mean, I think that's fair game, given it's in your bio.
Well, I've been practicing your theme song, but I won't dare, subject your listeners to my rendition of it.
Do it nearly as well as George.
I defer to the master.
So, do you have a favorite show tune that you like to sing in the shower or in your living room?
Oh, it would be too hard to pick. I love them all. It's a wonderful thing that I share with my mom, despite the fact that I like to talk about things that she thinks I shouldn't in public. But we have a deep and abiding love for musicals, theater.
Which one have you seen most recently? Have you seen it one?
Well, I got to see Hamilton here in the last month or two when it came through Dallas, and it lived up to all of my expectations. I was a little afraid that after a couple of years of so much hurrah that it might not meet, what I was expecting.
How long did it take for you to get tickets?
I was very lucky. I have a friend who is a theater critic, and I occasionally get to be his plus one. And so we had a fabulous view of an amazing show. I was really lucky.
Oh, you are, yeah.
Yeah, you got the inside track there.
I do indeed.
And before we talk about architecture, you're also involved with something really retro called Address Me Dallas. What's that?
That's right. I'm an old school letter writer. And several years ago, I started thinking about the fact that it was a dying art and that there might be some fun around trying to gather people together and show them how much fun it is to write a letter, how beneficial it is to just stop and be peaceful and mindful and do a little writing. And then it certainly is a tiny little gift that you give someone when you spend the time to write them a letter and tell them how you're feeling. And so I host an annual event here in Dallas. It's our annual letter writing event for the city. And we bring people together, and the whole community is invited to come and write letters with us. We have vintage typewriters that people can sit down and use if they're so inspired. We have a collection of vintage letters that are both from my personal collection and also from the Dallas Public Library's archives and are tied to the cultural history of our city. And it's great fun. I can't wait for it every April during National Letter Writing Month.
The U.S. Postal Service must love you, too.
I think they do. I'm sure I keep them busier than anybody else on my blog.
That a girl. Thea, tell us how you discovered modernism in Albuquerque.
Well, I happened to come into Albuquerque in 2014, and when I touched down here, I was expecting what, the Tourism Bureau happens to broadcast all across the nation, which is come to New Mexico. We have beautiful adobe buildings and beautiful stucco buildings, and it's kind of got that ancient feel to it. And yes, that's here, but I pulled up on Route 66 my first day, and I went backwards and forwards, and I just couldn't stop driving the roads here because as I looked around, there was just so much. It was so different than what I'd expected, and I became a little obsessed.
What does that mean exactly? What does obsession look like on you, Thea?
Obsession means piloting a project like Modern Albuquerque. There's a certain level of crazy that has to, happen before you try to take something like this on and change the perspective of the entire city to get us valuing the architecture of our recent past.
Yes, my wife refers to this entire project as a 12-year seizure, so I can understand how that works for you. Wayne has a question.
Thea, I just want to interject. Wayne Pond here. You and I are not even total strangers or virtual strangers. We are complete strangers. But I want you to know I feel a deep kinship. I grew up in Albuquerque. I have wonderful memories of the city in the 40s and 50s and 60s. This is not the time or the place to have the conversation. But hello, Albuquerque. It's so good to talk to somebody.
What a small world.
Oh, who knows I grew up in the Northeast Heights. Let's leave it at that, okay?
Okay. Well, I would love to follow up with you more later and find out where in the Northeast Heights.
Aspen Avenue between San Mateo and San Pedro.
All right, we're gonna have a talk later. We'll follow
All right,
up.
good.
If you ask Wayne a question, he will answer, so just fair warning. So, Thea, are you any relation to the famous Phoenix architect, Ralph Haver?
I am not related to Ralph Haver. It's actually really funny, George. I went out to Modern Phoenix earlier this year to check out their home tour in preparation for doing the first Albuquerque Mid-Mod home tour. And I pulled up, and of course I have to sign my waiver and everything, and I hand it over to the guy who was taking those waivers, and he takes one look at my last name, and he just got so excited, and I had to shut down.
Oh my God,
quickly.
it's Thea Haver.
No, that's just my last name.
So you must face disappointment on a regular basis in that part of the country.
In Phoenix.
Allison King was so excited when she first heard from me, and I had to let her down.
Well, that's okay. Amy, tell us a little bit about Mod Texas and your crowdsourcing project.
Sure. Our story actually begins in Oklahoma. A couple of years ago, I got a perfectly timed Instagram ad that invited us to go up to Oklahoma City to visit their Oklahoma Modernism Weekend that's produced by Okie Mod Squad.
Oh, sure.
And It was such a fabulous weekend full of great activities, a home tour, a vintage car show, a curated marketplace of furnishings, lectures, and all sorts of fun activities, including a vintage fashion show. It was just over the top, so much fun. And coming back to Dallas, I started to ask myself, well, who in the world is doing this in the state of Texas, and couldn't we benefit from a similar idea of a group of people coming together to promote modernism across the state? And what we have really as a blessing here in Texas is that there are dozens of nonprofit organizations that are working in the history and preservation space. We've got 3 Docomomo chapters here. We have Mid-Tex Mod, which covers the Austin-San Antonio area, Houston Mod, which is Greater Houston, and here where I am, there's a North Texas chapter. And so between those groups and many others that are across the state, what I discovered is that there were these great institutions, but mostly working in a siloed way, focused on the region that they were charged with protecting. And after visiting with them and learning a little bit more about the preservation landscape beyond my neighborhood here in Dallas, I decided to put together a little project. And Mod Texas is kind of acting like the ad council for Texas modernism. We're not a nonprofit. We are just a PR campaign, bringing people together to shine a light on these groups that are already doing the good work and need funding for their preservation efforts, and then to try to bring everyone together and get Texans in all these little corners of the state to play I Spy with us. So our current project is called Mapping Mod, and we're on Instagram right now, and we're encouraging people to pull over and take pictures when they see something interesting and help us to create the largest collection of photography of mid-century architecture in the state.
That's incredible. So how's it going so far?
It's been really exciting. You know, nothing's more fun than waking up in the morning and finding that someone has shared a building that I've never seen before. And since I'm a novice in this field, haven't studied architecture or design or preservation, I have everything to learn. So every day I'm thrilled when someone else shares some new information, and I'm learning each day a little bit more about Texas's modernist landscape.
How many postings have you got so far to this Instagram project?
I think we are over 2,200 uses of our Mod Texas hashtag. And we're working with press around the state and doing a lot of grassroots work, reaching out to people who love Instagram and who are active on it, encouraging them to use a thing that they're already playing with a little bit and add in the opportunity to help us do something more meaningful. You know, the internet can be a scary, horrible place, and we're really looking at it optimistically and saying this is a project that's so big that we can't do it alone, and we really need Texans around the state who are strangers to come together and help us do something really meaningful.
So are people trying to figure out the architect too, or are they just snapping the photo of the cool house they drove by?
Well, there's a little bit of both. There are folks who are involved in the project who are, I think, architects or historians themselves, and usually they're bringing to the table and to their posts some more information about the subjects that they are capturing. Ben Kausch is an amazing human and a great Texan and is very active in the project and has been for a very long time involved in Texas preservation, including modernism. But we also have people who aren't necessarily photographers who love to do research, and that's kind of the beauty of the project, is whatever your skill set that you bring to the table, whether it's sitting at home and doing some research to help us figure out the year that a building was built or who the architect was, that there's a place for those folks. And then it's the most fun when people start to share memories of the buildings that we're capturing, when people tell us, I remember, going there for an event, or I have a memory with a family member there. And we're also able sometimes to draw some connections where someone will say, this architecture looks exactly like another town in Texas. It must be the same architect. So people are drawing connections that we wouldn't otherwise be aware of.
And Amy, where can people find this information?
Right now, we are on Instagram at Mod Texas. And we also have a Facebook group called Mod Texas that is self-populating. So there, anyone can share anything that they'd like that's on topic, whether it's mid-century design or architecture. And then on our Instagram, the hashtag is how people can share their information. And then I do a lot of reposting and trying to synthesize information as best I can. Sometimes someone will share an image but not know any of the background, and if I'm able to do some of that research as well, I'll share and layer in some additional information.
Thea, down the road from Albuquerque in Santa Fe, it's 24/7 arts and artists, and Georgia O'Keeffe and elaborately relaxing spas like 10,000 Waves. But there's modernism in Santa Fe too, right?
There's a small amount of modernism in Santa Fe. Of course, Santa Fe has that look that we were talking about. There's kind of an image of Santa Fe that's been perpetuated. There's a great book called The Myth of Santa Fe, written by Chris Wilson, that kind of talks about that architectural history and the decisions to do that and make that kind of the standard and traditional Santa Fe architecture. However, we were actually really lucky to find an individual who lives in a mid-century modern home in Santa Fe, and so they are there. She directed us to 2 residential streets in the Santa Fe neighborhoods, and we've been meaning to get up and check it out.
Well, cool. What does Modern Albuquerque do for the architecture-loving public? What are some of the programs and partners that you work with?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because programming is a key part of what Modern Albuquerque does. While we also, like Amy, have a strong Instagram presence where we're always sharing photos and information with people, we additionally have a newsletter that we get out. We try to write articles about mid-century modern buildings here in Albuquerque, buildings that people might know, buildings that they might not know. If there's renovations happening in those projects, then we try to share that information with them as well. In the public arena, in the actual, come out and participate with us, we do events like a Mid-Mod home tour. We've also done film screenings. Actually, this summer we had a fun event. It was the 50th anniversary of a Led Zeppelin show that had taken place at a building called the Albuquerque Civic Auditorium. Now, unfortunately, the Civic Auditorium has since been torn down, but we thought it would be fun to bring people in and, kind of share its history and talk about it. And we use that as a historic preservation event, because it would have been so much more cool to have been able to host that party in the auditorium itself, but it's been gone for 33 years.
You didn't happen to get Jimmy Page or Robert Plant to show up as well?
I am so sad we couldn't do that. No.
Oh, well.
That would have been awesome.
It would have been amazing.
A Led Zeppelin cover band might have worked. I tell you what, George and Wayne have stepped out. I think they're practicing enunciation in the hallway.
Yeah, all right, come on, George. Give it a go.
The rain in Spain stays mainly on the plain.
What are you, from South Georgia? Is that what I'm... No. The rain in Spain stays mainly on the plain. Try again. Depth of feeling here.
The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain.
Did anybody hear me ask him to sing?
No, well, show tunes. It's a theme.
I approve.
Show tunes. Come on now, folks.
By George, he's got it.
Excellent. Excellent.
All right, while they're doing that, we're going to hear from modernist realtor Angela Roll. In a timeless adventure that we are largely making up, realtor Angela Roll grew up in Switzerland, the daughter of a former U.S. ambassador wrongly accused of spying for the Russians. An Olympic champion skier, she skied across the border into France by mistake, causing an avalanche that completely buried the very first French Waffle House.
Mon Dieu.
At 18, following a career-ending injury involving a little red dress, a wood-turning lathe, Cristal champagne, and Rim Cool House, Angela moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, where she studied architecture by day and partied with Courvoisier's former neighbor's son, Gustave, by night. Angela then traveled to Denmark in the company of international man of mystery Eric of Aarhus, whom she later married. While sketching a piece of licorice on a napkin at IKEA, they were confronted by Santiago Calatrava. He was kind of mad about them stealing his turning torso design. Angela narrowly escaped back to North Carolina via her invisible jet, of course, because all heroines have one. And she became a formidable real estate agent with specialized design training, capable of brilliant advice to buyers and sellers of modernist houses. Angela Roll is your special agent. Reach her at angelaroll.com, that's ROEHL, or 919-995-0550.
Thank you, Tom. And we're back. Whew. And out in the hall, Wayne also taught me the incredibly witty Element song by Tom Lehrer, which involves a lot of extremely precise pronunciation. We're going to spare you that experience today, but if you want to hear it, Google Tom Lehrer, that's Lehrer, Element Song, or for a more current version, Google Daniel Radcliffe.
You mean Harry Potter?
Harry Potter. If you Google Daniel Radcliffe Harry Potter, you can hear his version of the Element Song. And while you're at it, Google Tom Lehrer. He was one of the funniest comedians of our mid-century vibe, 1962. And as of October 2019, he's still around at 93.
Really?
He sure is.
Oh, that's great.
So, Amy, who are some of the most famous modernist architects to come out of Texas?
Well, there are a lot of modernist architects who have left an imprint here. In Dallas, Frank Lloyd Wright left us the Kalita Humphreys Theater, built in 1959, which is a fabulous example of his work and a place where our city is working right now to try to work on restoration of that space. Charles Dilbeck and George Dahl are big names here in the state of Texas. If you're familiar with Fair Park, which is our beautiful Art Deco park space here in Dallas, that is one of George Dahl's pieces. Paul Rudolph has buildings both in Fort Worth and Dallas.
Really? What kind of buildings does Paul have there?
The Bass Residence in Fort Worth is absolutely
that's a massive house.
Stunning. Yes, and then he also built another corporate building called Brook Hollow Plaza that was built in the 60s.
Okay.
I know you've interviewed Mark Lamster, who wrote the great book Man in the Glass House about Philip Johnson. And Johnson also has had a big impact on Texas, especially here in North Texas. He designed the JFK Cenotaph Memorial that's downtown, and the Beck House, Thanksgiving Square, and, of course, the Fort Worth Water Gardens, which are famous for many reasons, including being featured in Logan's Run.
Logan's Run, that's an early 70s sci-fi film, right?
Yeah. That's right, and it featured I.M. Pei's City Hall here, and also the Dallas Apparel Mart, which was pretty fantastic. It has been
was it
demolished.
Set in Dallas? Or was it meant to? Okay, I don't remember.
Michael York.
And Heather Menzies. Why do I remember that? I don't know.
Okay.
I remember
and Farrah Fawcett. I thought she was in it too, wasn't she? Okay, Tom is going to Google this while we're talking.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you guys might want to talk about movies a little bit, and I actually, with the help of our Mod Texans on Facebook, we've been brainstorming a little bit about modernist homes and buildings here in Texas that have been featured in movies. Do you have any ideas?
No, but please tell us yours.
Well, Bottle Rocket, which was from 1996, features the Gillen Residence, which was the last house designed and completed by Frank Lloyd Wright. That is the movie where the two guys are plotting a burglary. This is one of the early movies with Luke Wilson and Owen Wilson. It's kind of a cult classic here in Texas.
George, I got to tell you, Brainstorm, the last movie that Natalie Wood made, filmed at the National Humanities Center.
Oh, yes, right here in Research Triangle Park.
That's right, the Burroughs Welcome Building and in the Humanities Center.
Yep.
Douglas, what's his name?
Trumbull,
who did the special effects for 2001, directed that.
Yeah, I had a good friend of mine that worked on the special effects crew for that film.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, the Humanities Center shines brightly in that picture. You bet.
Yep. So, Logan's Run. Farrah Fawcett was in it, and all those other folks, plus Peter Ustinov.
Yeah, he played like the wise man who saved civilization at some point.
Yoda.
He's listed as old man.
Oh, there you go.
They needed one.
All right, so back to you. More movies, Amy.
Well, speaking of old men, Old Man and the Gun that came out in 2018 with Robert Redford, where he's playing a bank robber. Has a wonderful little feature of a bank in Belmead, which is in the Waco area here in Texas. It's called American Bank, and we refer to it as the Round Bank. When you see an image of it, you know that you've seen it, and it makes an appearance at the very beginning of the movie. And it is beautiful, and unfortunately, it is imperiled. We've just gotten news here in the last couple of months that it's slated for demolition. And it's a heartbreak to hear of those things, and I know there's some discussion amongst our preservation groups about what we might be able to do, encouraging the bank to not destroy it. But I'm so glad that at least we have it documented in that film.
There's a bank in Raleigh, First Citizens Bank, that their headquarters building up by North Hills is a round structure, like 8 or 9 stories high. They only went up about 10 years ago. But I don't know what it is about banks and round buildings.
Well, there was a whole phase in the 50s and 60s where they were doing interesting modern bank buildings.
Yeah.
And they kind of fell out of that by the 70s. It became much more traditional at that point. Let's switch over to New Mexico. Thea, who are some of your architects?
Well, actually, since you're mentioning round banks, the first name I'm going to throw out is a man named Hal Dean. Hal Dean was an architectural designer here in Albuquerque. He relocated to Las Vegas some years ago. But we also have a lot of homegrown architectural talent. We have a gentleman named George Pearl, who was part of an architectural firm called SMPC Architects. They're actually still in practice today and just are celebrating 75 years in business. Max Flato and Jason Moore were probably some of our most modernist architects here in Albuquerque. But of course, we've also got a lot of buildings that were designed by some of the folks from California, people like Armit and Davis, and Victor Gruen and Associates, who did the first mall here in Albuquerque. And I actually just found a neighborhood that was designed by L.C. Major and Associates, Bellhaven, which is pretty fun. So we're finding all of these connections to not just local architectural talent, but also West Coast talent as well.
Now, I mentioned earlier that there was a TV show filmed there for a number of years, In Plain Sight, which was about the U.S. Marshals Program. But even before that TV show came on, I always heard that Albuquerque was the place they put people in witness protection to hide out. Do you know if that's true?
Confirm that for you.
Well, and Walter White.
Yeah, well, right. Yeah, sure.
We do have Breaking Bad is the TV show that everyone else thinks of when they think of Albuquerque.
I know.
I kind of like it because a lot of the locations in Breaking Bad, places like the Sims building, which was the DEA office, that's a major modernist building here. It's actually on the National Register, designed by Flato and Moore and finished in 1954. It's an incredible example of international style architecture.
Amy, we have a North Carolina connection to Texas through Harwell Hamilton Harris, who led a group of wild architects called the Texas Rangers in the late 50s at the University of Texas at Austin. Do you all keep track of any of Harwell Hamilton Harris's buildings?
You know, I know that there are some here in Dallas, and in fact, I've read more about that work from U.S. Modernist website. So I think that they have a library in Austin, if I'm not mistaken, who has those archives.
Yes, they sure do. I think they have most of his stuff, maybe 2/3 of it, and the rest of it is at North Carolina State University in Raleigh.
And, you know, I'd be remiss not to mention O'Neill Ford as one of our most favorite architects here in the state. He's responsible for the little chapel in the woods here that was built in 1938 and lived in Denton, Texas for a long time and built many buildings there. And then he's responsible for the Tower of the Americas, which was part of the 1968 Hemisphere campus, which was a celebration of the World's Fair. And it was the largest observing tower in the U.S., I think, until the mid-'90s. And it's still there in San Antonio, welcoming people to what's now called Hemisphere Park, which is modified from the original exposition, but still has so many of the beautiful buildings there, and a beautiful mural by Juan O'Gorman. And if you're familiar with visiting the UNAM campus in Mexico City, he did the tile work and mural work that covers that building. And he's got a beautiful 120-foot mural there in San Antonio.
What is an observation tower? Is it what I'm thinking it is?
Like the Seattle Space Needle?
Right, okay.
Yes,
Right.
Or the towers in Queens for the New York World's Fairs of 39 and 64.
Places you go up and you can see.
Yeah, see the whole fair from there.
Because, you know, Wheel of Fortune was in Seattle last week, and so there were a lot of shots of the Space Needle. Sorry,
I digress. Thank you for that update, Tom. I wanted to know where Vanna was.
She was on the very top of the Space Needle and looked very queasy.
Yeah, it's high up there.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure when you say observation tower that.
And I believe this is correct, since we're on Seattle, that the firm Olson Kundig, who does a lot of terrific modernist houses, just finished a renovation of the Space Needle a year or two ago.
That's part of why I think they were doing the show there.
Yeah, exactly. Amy, your mom evidently has a list of things that are impolite to discuss in public, so I wonder if you could discuss a few for us.
I won't mortify her by doing that, but I love talking about, you know, politics and religion and all of the things that I think my mom would say are better not discussed.
Things that make Thanksgiving so special.
Right.
Do you combine anything for a particular effect with your mom, like religion and sex in the same topic, or any combo platters that you put out there for her?
I think it's
well,
a no.
I have a question for you all. I have been chatting with some people here in Texas about what the most important mid-century building is in the world, and I have a volley, and that is Mission Control Center for NASA that was built in 1965 and designed by Charles Luckman. Is there another modernist building that is more important than managing our space program?
I've only ever seen it from the inside.
The exterior is gorgeous, and we've got some photographs of it on Mod Texas's Instagram account if you'd like to see it.
Do you consider SAC Command in, what is it, Cheyenne Mountain? Is that modernist architecture?
It's inside the mountain, Wayne, I think.
Well, but it's still architecture.
That's true. It's just hard to get a good photograph of it. Now, let's defer to our architectural historian, our true professional here, Paige. What do you think?
I'd have to think about that one.
Yeah, I saw you wince.
I know. That's but I think I'll go with Amy on it. I mean, that's a safe bet, right?
I remember there was this, was it ABC reporter named Jules Bergman?
Yep.
Who was on the air for every rocket launch.
He was their science.
He was their science and space guy.
Yeah.
And he was always standing by the rocket or standing.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But
that's
not
in Florida.
Well, yeah. And other places, too. I think he was in Texas.
Could be.
They'd give him access inside Mission Control. You'd see all those guys, you know, in their narrow ties and their buzz cuts, right? That's when in all the photos for that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. I'm looking forward to seeing some images of that on your Instagram feed.
We've got a story up at the very top labeled NASA if you want to explore a little bit. This is, of course, the 50th anniversary year of Apollo 11, and we went down to tour the space and, you know, weep a little bit at the amazing human achievements and the optimism of that era that has a heart here in Texas.
And I believe the phrase, Houston, we have a problem, that came later, right? Wasn't that Apollo 13?
13. Yep.
Yes, 13.
That was 13, not 11.
A little bit of a space nerd over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was 13.
Okay. Thea, how can people reach you and your organization?
Probably the best thing would be to first find us on Instagram, too. Of course, like Amy, we've got a great resource there, and you can connect with us on Instagram or visit our website, www.modernabq.org.
And Amy, how can people reach you?
On Instagram at Mod Texas and on Facebook as well. And we hope at some point in time next year our URL will be up and running and we'll have kind of a website where people can find information about Texas modernism and connect to the institutions who are working in the space. In fact, right now I am doing research to try to put together some road trip ideas. So folks who might want to come to Texas to explore modernism would have a great resource for how they could take a road trip to explore, and then certainly through our Mapping Mod project, be able to find spots of Texas where they see buildings that they'd like to get a closer look at.
Yeah, I think Paige and I would hate that. We would just be a terrible, terrible, terrible time.
Well, we would love to host you here at the Statler Hilton if you guys come to town. And we're working right now on redoing the Cabana Hotel, which was built in '62 by Jay Sarno, who you may know, who built the Caesar's Palace in Vegas.
Yes.
And in the fall of 2021, that will be open again. It was home to lots of celebrity guests back in the day. And for about 30 years, it was a jail here in Dallas. So all of us are really eager to see that space fully restored and able to host us for cocktails.
Well, Thea and Amy, thank you so much for joining us. The two of you are doing wonderful work for the modernist cause, and I hope to meet you both in person soon. Maybe we'll all get together at Modernism Week in Palm Springs one of these years.
Yeah.
Sounds fabulous.
Here's hoping. Thanks so much for having me.
And Paige, thank you for coming in as co-host. It's great to finally meet you in person.
It was great to meet everyone, and thanks for putting up with me today.
You can follow Paige at Klaushaus at Instagram. Want to spell that for them?
Of course. It's 2 A's, 2 S's, CLAASSHAUS.
So it's actually 3 A's and 3 S's.
Yeah.
Technically,
Vanna
you're
White
right.
sold you a lot of vowels.
She did. She did.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special real estate agent for modernist houses, and nichiha.com/US Modernist. Okay, take us out, boys.
I'm Tom Guild. Visit usmodernist.org's massive Modernist archives to hear past shows, discover 7,000 mid-century houses, and access 2.6 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. You can get a hold of George at george@usmodernist.org or on Instagram at mr.modernism.
And I'm Wayne Pond. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Cindy Stratton.
It's not a real name.
Of course not. She researches guests and recently made a rare public appearance at one of our tours.
She was mobbed like Taylor Swift.
U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. George and Tom will be back soon with another Wild as New Mexico, biggest Texas edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you, Wayne.